Welcome back to True Crime for Sleep. If you've got a moment, leave a comment and like and subscribe for more late-night casework. Tonight, you're taking calls that look like accidents until they don't. It's 2:17 a.m. and you're on a dispatch console that never really sleeps. A wrong number slips into 911, breathy, quick, then gone before you can ask a second question. You call back, and the line routes to a payphone outside a closed strip mall, the kind that should be dead by now. The voicemail clicks on, and a calm voice says your first name like it's reading a badge. You tag it as a suspicious misdial, request a patrol check, and pull the location record knowing it's only accurate enough to argue about later. Tomorrow night, the same cadence hits again, a different payphone, the same narrow stretch of highway, timed right inside shift change. So when those calls start landing like clockwork, what failure in call routing, callback policy, and response timing lets a wrong number become a repeatable method? The headset sits heavy on your hairline. Warm plastic, old phone, somebody else's sweat turned into infrastructure. The room smells like burnt coffee and printer toner, the official cologne of overnight government work. You stare at the call log, and you tell yourself the simple story first. Some drunk, fat-fingered 911. Some kid dared a friend. Somebody's pocket called while they wrestled car keys. And then you hear that voicemail again in your memory, calm as a metronome, saying your first name like it belongs to him. You pull up the automatic number identification and automatic location information, the system's best guess at where that call came from. It is not magic. It is a tired database trying to keep up with a city that keeps moving. The screen gives you an address range on South Tacoma Way, a strip mall with dark windows, and the payphone bolted to a pillar like an organ donor nobody claimed. You request a patrol check anyway, because this is the part where you decide what kind of night it becomes. You can shrug and clear it, or you can be the person who makes it somebody's problem. You pick the second one. Unit 3-1, you say, voice flat, because panic is contagious and you cannot afford an outbreak. Suspicious callback, payphone kiosk outside the closed mall, possible tampering. Can you swing through? They answer with that tired laugh cops use when they are trying not to sound tired. Copy. 5 minutes later, their radio comes back and you can hear wind through the microphone. Payphone is off the hook. Handset is warm. No one around. You pause because you do not like the phrase warm. Warm means recent. Warm means somebody stood there long enough to leave heat behind and still had time to vanish. The officer adds one more detail, like he almost forgot it. There's a smear on the coin return. Looks like grease, maybe gum. He says it like it is nothing. You type it anyway, because you have learned that everything starts as nothing. Your supervisor walks past your station with a file in one hand, eyes half shut from fluorescent fatigue. You flag him down just enough to be annoying, not enough to be insubordinate. You tell him about the voicemail, about the name, about the warm handset. He looks at the screen, then at you, then at the clock. He says, could be a prank. He says, write it up as suspicious misdial, and we will see if it repeats. That last part sounds responsible, but it is the softest kind of dismissal. Repeat means tomorrow's problem. Repeat means you are not asking anyone to do extra work tonight. You file the report, and you watch it slide into the system. like a coin into a vending machine. If the machine is broken, you do not get your soda. You just lose the coin. When your shift ends, the sky is still black and Tacoma is still doing whatever it does when you are not watching. You drive home and you try not to picture a man at a payphone rehearsing your name. Sleep comes in thin strips. Then the next night comes. 2:28 a.m. and you are back in the chair, back under the same humming lights, back in the same low-level apocalypse of ringing lines and keyboard clicks. And there it is again, 911. Open line. A breath, a shuffle, like shoes on concrete, a faint click, like the plastic door on a payphone slapping shut. Then, nothing. You do the callback because you are supposed to. The system routes you to a different payphone, a mile north, still on that narrow stretch that parallels the highway. The voicemail clicks, and the same calm voice says your first name again. This time, he says it slower, like he is teaching you how to pronounce it. Congratulations. It is not a prank anymore. Pranks get bored. Pranks do not keep receipts. You open a map on your secondary screen and pin the locations. 2 points. Same corridor. Same time window. You pull up the CAD notes, the computer-aided dispatch history for that corridor. You see the pattern that makes your stomach feel like it is remembering an old illness. Shift change, 2 to 3 a.m. That is when units are thin, when reports are being finished, when people are trading cars, trading radios, trading responsibility. That is when a city is most itself, and your coverage is least. You make a decision without telling anyone you are making it. You start your own log, not in the official system. Something personal, a private timeline, because you do not trust the machine to remember what matters. You write down the exact second the call hit. You write down the callback result. You write down the payphone location. You write down the weather, because weather changes what people are willing to do outside. You write down which units were free, because availability is the difference between prevention and paperwork. You do not know you are building a case. You just know you are building something that will not be downgraded to unfounded. The third call comes 2 nights later. 2:06 a.m. It is even shorter. A single inhale, a quick, soft laugh that stops itself. Then the line drops. Callback routes to a prepaid cell number, not a payphone. The phone rings until it goes to voicemail. No name this time. Just silence, and then a click, like someone ended the greeting early. You ask a tech in the building, the kind of person who actually knows how the wires behave. You keep your voice casual because you do not want to be the dispatcher who thinks every weird call is a serial killer. You say, "Can 911 get hit from a prepaid and not show us much?" He says, "Sure." He says, "Depends on the carrier and the tower." He says, "Location can smear, especially if the phone never stays connected." He shrugs, and the shrug feels like a door closing. That night, you look at your log and you notice something. All 3 calls land when the patrol sergeants are busiest. 2:17, 2:28, 2:06. Not random, not convenient. Just inside the window where your response time has that natural wobble, like a tired knee. Your mind tries to make a benign story again, because that is what minds do at night. Maybe someone is testing payphones. Maybe someone is lonely. Maybe a teenager found an old handset and thinks this is funny. But the voice saying your name does not fit. Names are effort. Names mean intention. The fourth call comes the next night, right at 2:41 a.m. This one has words. Barely. You hear a woman's voice maybe, or a man doing a woman's voice. It is hard to tell through the distortion. She says, "I am sorry." She says, "Wrong number." She says, "Please." Then the line goes dead. You stare at the waveform display, watching the seconds tick by like blood dripping. You do the callback. Payphone again. Different kiosk, same corridor. The voicemail greeting is not the comm man this time. It is a generic recording, the kind the phone company uses when nobody bothered to customize anything. You listen anyway. No name, no message. Just the sense that someone wanted you to hear the emptiness. You request a patrol check again. The responding officer comes back 10 minutes later, annoyed. Nothing here. He says the handset is hanging properly. He says the area is dead. He says, "You want me to search dumpsters for ghosts." You apologize because dispatchers apologize for other people's choices all night long. Then he adds, almost as an afterthought, "There's fresh scuff marks by the base, like someone's shoes pivoted quick." He laughs and says, "Probably just kids." You write it down anyway. Scuff marks are effort. Effort means intention. The fifth call is the one that changes the air in the room. It comes after a stretch of routine misery, domestic disputes, noise complaints, a drunk who cannot find his own house. It hits at 2:14 a.m., so close to the first one, it feels like a signature. This time, there is no breathy confusion. There is a crisp dial tone cut, then a whisper. You cannot make out the words, but you can make out the posture. Someone is close to the mouthpiece. Someone is smiling. You can hear it in the shape of the sound. Then, very softly, a click, and you realize the click is not the line dropping. It is the payphone receiver being placed back on the cradle. A deliberate end. Callback. Payphone. Voicemail. And there he is again. Calm voice. Your first name? Like a bedtime story with a knife under the pillow. You take off the headset for a second, just to feel your own scalp. You look around the dispatch floor. Everybody else is working their own little emergencies. Nobody is looking at you. You are alone with the part of the city that knows your name. You could keep logging it quietly. You could keep being the only person who cares. Or you could force it upward. Into the chain, into the world where people hate extra work but love liability. That is the decision point. If you push, you become the problem. If you do not push, you might be helping someone keep doing whatever this is. You walk to your supervisor again, file in hand, because paper makes things feel more real to managers. You say, "We have 5 wrong number calls over 10 days. You say, "They cluster during shift change." You say, "Callbacks route to payphones along the same stretch." You say, "The caller knows my name." Your supervisor rubs his face like he is trying to erase the night. He asks if you are sure about the name. You say yes. He asks if you recorded the voicemail. You say the system keeps it if we pull it. He sighs, and you can see him weighing the cost, not moral cost, staffing cost, time cost. He says fine. He says we will notify patrol to increase visibility around those kiosks. He says, you send a note to records, flag these calls as related. It is not a task force. It is not a full court press, but it is movement. And movement is what you have been trying to buy with your attention. That night, you send out a bulletin to units, short nuisance calls to 911, likely originating from payphones and prepaid phones. Requests for extra checks, requests to note any suspicious persons, any vehicles idling, any foot traffic when the businesses are closed. You feel ridiculous writing it. You feel like you are asking armed adults to hunt a whisper, but you also feel the relief of making it real. 2 nights later, a rookie officer keys up around 2:30 a.m. You hear the uncertainty in his voice, the way he is trying to sound older than he is. He says he has a couple arguing near the payphone outside the 24-hour print place. He says they are in the shadow by the dumpster enclosure. He says he is going to make contact. You sit up because your log pings in your head. That print place is one of your pins. You pull up the live call screen and you see it at the same time. A wrong number call, open line, just hit your queue. The timestamp matches the rookie's radio traffic within seconds. Cause and effect. You tell the rookie to stand by and you dispatch a second unit because alone is how people get hurt. The rookie says they stopped arguing. He says they are walking away. Then he corrects himself. He says it did not look like arguing. It looked like swapping something, palm to palm, fast. Then separate. He did not see faces. He did not see a weapon. He saw a transaction. The second unit arrives too late to catch anyone, because they always do. They find the payphone. The handset is damp, like someone wiped it. There is a faint chemical smell, like cheap cleaner, like someone trying to erase fingerprints with whatever was under their sink. The rookie says there is a sedan parked across the lot, engine running, no lights. He reads you the plate. You run it. The plate comes back to an older vehicle, registered to a woman in Spanaway. Nothing flagged, no warrants, no reason on paper to care. But paper is always behind. The sedan rolls out before anyone can get eyes on the driver, and your wrong number caller hangs up right as it disappears. You sit with that because now you have a working theory, and theories are dangerous because they make you feel smart. The wrong number calls are not the point. They are the cover. They are a metronome, keeping time for something happening in the dark, near fixed points, at moments when your system is thinnest. Payphones, back alleys, businesses with blind spots and quick exits. You pull the map up again and you add layers. Pawn shops, check cashing storefronts, a corner liquor store with a narrow side passage, places where people exchange money for relief, places where people do not ask questions. Your log is starting to look like a constellation, and constellations are just random stars until someone draws a line through them and says, "There, that is the shape." You push the information to a detective you know, someone who still answers their phone at night without sounding like you ruined their life. He meets you at the station just before dawn, tie loosened, eyes gritty. You show him the call times. You show him the payphone locations. You mention the rookie's palm-to-palm swap. He squints at the map and says, "Could be drug dealing." You say, "Sure, but why call 911 first? Why leave a trail that touches emergency services? Why risk response?" He says, "Maybe it is kids." You say, "The caller knows my name. that detail lands. Detectives care about details that smell like targeting. He asks how a caller could know your name. You tell him dispatch recordings sometimes air on scanners. You tell him people talk. You tell him a calm voice can learn anything if it listens long enough. The detective nods, and you can see him filing it away in the mental drawer labeled maybe. He says he will ask Telecom Crimes to take a look. He says, keep logging. He says, do not get obsessed. You do not laugh, but you want to. Obsessed is just what people call it when you notice something before they do. The calls pause for 3 days, and that is almost worse. A pattern breaking makes you doubt yourself. It makes you feel like you overreacted. It makes your supervisor's sigh feel justified. You start to wonder if the caller moved on because you made noise, or if the caller moved on because the caller got what they wanted. On the 4th night, the call returns, not at 2-something, at 1:59 a.m., right before the shift change window opens. You see it hit the board. 911. Open line. This time, there is a sound in the background that you have not heard before. A low thump, a car door closing, then footsteps, quick, not running, but purposeful. Then a voice, not the calm man, a different voice, younger, nervous. He says, I got it. Then the line goes dead. You call back, prepaid cell, rings once, then goes to voicemail. And the voicemail greeting is the calm man again. He does not say your name. He says, sorry, wrong number. You wait for the beep like an idiot, hoping he will leave you a mistake. Nothing, no breath, no laugh, no name, just dead air and the soft click of a line ending. You sit there with the receiver tone in your ear, and you feel the shift change coming like weather. The room is quieter at 1:59 because half the city is deciding whether to stay awake and the other half is deciding whether to get honest or get dangerous. You mark it in your private log because the official system will never love this the way you do. 1:59, you write and you underline it once. A test call. A repositioning, a man adjusting his metronome. You pull up the corridor map again, and you drag your pins north and south. Payphones, prepaid hits, those little digital scars on the city. It is not that there are a lot of them. It is that there are just enough fixed points left in a world going mobile, like old teeth that never fell out, and someone is using them like stepping stones across a river. You have a choice now, and it is the choice you always get. Treat it like noise, or treat it like a pattern. You message patrol again, because you are not ready to be wrong in silence. You keep it short, because long messages get ignored. Possible related misdial calls, still hitting around shift change, still payphone corridor. Please note any subjects lingering. You hit send and you immediately feel guilty. Not because it is wrong, because it is work. And the night shift is a place where you can feel work like weight. The calls do not come again that night. They come the next. 2:03 a.m., like he is back in his preferred groove. This one is different because you hear traffic, not highway wash. Close traffic, a car passing right beside the microphone, a hiss of wet tires. So it is raining or the street is slick. or someone just rolled through a puddle. And under that, a sound that makes your shoulders tighten. A beep, not a phone beep, a keypad beep, like someone is pressing buttons on a payphone while connected to you, like someone is navigating a menu with you listening. He is not just calling. He is doing something while you are on the line. Then the hang-up. You call back fast enough to feel proud, which is always a bad sign. It routes to a payphone you have not pinned yet. Outside a small check-cashing storefront off Pacific Avenue, one of those places with thick glass and neon that buzzes, the voicemail is not the calm voice. It is a generic greeting again, and that is almost worse because it means he did not need you to recognize him. He needed you to answer. You request the patrol check. You do not wait for your supervisor to bless it. You dispatch it like you would dispatch a burglar alarm, because that is what this is becoming. A triggered sensor, a signal that something might be happening right now, just out of sight. Unit arrives in 6 minutes, which is good for that hour. They find the payphone intact, handset cold, no one around. The officer sounds irritated, and you let him. "I do not see anything," he says. "It is a payphone. It is wet. It is gross. It is doing payphone stuff." Then he pauses. Then he says, "There is a receipt on the ground." He says it like it is trash, but he picks it up anyway because you asked for details, and now he is trapped in your concern. It is from the check cashing place, dated tonight, and on the back, in pen, someone wrote a few digits, not a full number, just the end of one. The officer reads them out, and you write them down twice. Then he adds, "There is writing too." He clears his throat like he hates himself for reading it. "Sorry, wrong number." He laughs because that is what cops do when a thing is too weird to sit with. You do not laugh. You ask him to bag it. You ask him to log it as found property connected to a suspicious call. He sighs, but he does it because you used the right words. Found property, connected, suspicious, words that turn trash into evidence. When you hang up, the dispatch room feels smaller because now the phrase is not just in your headset. It is on paper, out there in the rain, under fluorescent light. Someone is leaving breadcrumbs with your nightmare phrase on them, and you know what that means. He is not hiding it anymore. He is enjoying it. You contact a detective again, the one with the loosened tie and the drawer labeled maybe. You tell him about the receipt. You tell him about the partial digits. You tell him the phrase is written out like a joke somebody is telling to themselves. He goes quiet for a second. Then he says, "Do not touch anything else." He says, "If patrol finds anything like that again, we want it preserved." He says, "We are going to have to open a case file, if we have not already." His voice sounds like somebody just handed him an unpaid bill, because now he has to own it. Now it has weight. You feel a grim satisfaction, and you hate yourself for it, because the only way to make people care is to show them something dead or almost dead. And paper with a joke on it is not dead, but it is close enough to make the air change. Over the next week, the calls keep coming, but they change shape. They get shorter again. They get cleaner. Like he realized, he showed his hand with the receipt. 2:12 a.m., open line, breath, hang up. 2:35 a.m., a whisper you cannot parse, hang up. 2:08 a.m., Keypad beeps again? Hang up. And each time you call back, it is a payphone or a prepaid that cannot be traced cleanly. You start stacking the details in your log like bricks. Phone type, location, weather, units available. You even note the big calls that tie everyone up. A rollover on the freeway, a stabbing at a bar, a domestic where the screaming never stops, even when officers arrive, because you are starting to think the caller is listening to you, not personally. He knows when you are busy because the city tells him. Sirens are public, police radios can be scanned. A man with patience can sit in a car and time everything. And patience is a weapon when you are up against a system built on triage. Telecom Crimes finally sends you an email, which feels like getting a note from a distant planet. They explain the basics like you are 5, because that is how departments talk to each other. Automatic number identification gives you the billing number, if there is one. Automatic location information gives you an address estimate, if the database is current. Payphones sometimes show a trunk line that points to a kiosk, but it can be routed. Prepaid phones are worse because the subscriber information is a lie by design. They say they can request records, but it takes time. They say the calls are short, which means tower location is fuzzy. They say payphones are being phased out, which means maintenance records are spotty. Then they add the line that makes you stare at your screen. They say, your name being on voicemail could be from caller identification spoofing. He could be injecting a recorded greeting, or he could be using a voicemail box he controls and he knows your name from scanner traffic. In other words, yes, it is possible. Also, no, we cannot make it easy. You forward the email to the detective and you add your own note. He is timing shift change. He is using fixed points. He is leaving writing. It feels like a lure. You hesitate before you hit send because you know how you sound, like someone who wants a story to be true. But then you remember the receipt in the rain, and you hit send. 2 days later, you get pulled off your console for a meeting you did not ask for. That is how you know it finally climbed high enough to be inconvenient. You sit in a room that smells like dry erase markers and old carpet. A patrol sergeant is there, arms crossed, jaw tight. A detective you recognize, a telecom analyst, with a laptop and the haunted eyes of someone who never gets thanked. And you, the dispatcher who would not let the whisper die. They put your log on the table, printed out, which feels like someone reading your diary aloud. The detective starts with the obvious. We have multiple 911 missiles, all short duration, all clustered in a corridor, all during shift change. He does not say your name being on voicemail out loud at first, like it is embarrassing, like it makes the whole thing sound paranormal. But then he says it, and the patrol sergeant's eyebrows lift just slightly. That is the moment the room accepts this is not just nuisance. The telecom analyst shows a map of tower sectors and payphone addresses. It looks like a child scribbled on Tacoma with colored pencils, because that is what tower data is at that time, not GPS, not precise. A guess shaped like a pie slice. But the pie slices overlap your corridor again and again. The detective points to the receipt location. He says, if that writing is connected, it means the caller is physically near the payphone. He says, it means this is not just dialing from a basement. He says, it means we might catch him if we put eyes on the kiosks. The patrol sergeant scoffs because he is already doing the math. How many kiosks? How many units? How many other calls? He says, we do not have manpower to stake out every payphone. He says we can do extra patrol, but not a full surveillance. The detective looks at you and you can tell he wants you to say the thing he can use. You say he is consistent. You say he likes the 2 to 3 window. You say he likes the corridor. You say he is using the calls like signals. If you put eyes on one kiosk during that window, you might get lucky. The patrol sergeant says you cannot run a case on luck. The telecom analyst says we can try something else. He says we can set up a trap, but not the kind people imagine. He means a decoy, a controlled number, something that invites the call instead of waiting for it. Because right now you are reacting, and reaction is always late. The detective nods, and you feel the case pivot from passive logging to active bait, which is a fancy way of saying you are about to lie to a liar and hope you are better at it. The next week is paperwork, and not the glamorous kind. You learn that even a small operation needs approvals. Who can record what? Who can monitor which line? How to preserve evidence so defense attorneys cannot shred it later. You sit through explanations about chain of custody that feel like somebody describing how to carry a bowl of soup through a crowded hallway. Do not spill. Do not set it down. Document every hand that touches it. Because if you cannot prove the soup was always soup, the court will pretend it was water. They decide to seed decoy numbers in local classifieds. Nothing fancy. A lost dog notice, a for sale ad, a handyman posting, the kind of thing that makes strangers call you. And you write the text with the detective, which feels surreal. You pick names that are common enough to be believable. You pick neighborhoods that match the corridor. You pick numbers that are newly activated prepaid lines controlled by the department. They will ring into a monitored system and be recorded cleanly. And then you wait, which is what all investigations are, waiting and pretending you are doing something. You go back to your dispatch console and you keep taking real calls. Somebody's heart failing. Somebody's marriage failing. Somebody screaming because they cannot find their child. And in between, you stare at the corner of your screen where your decoy line sits. Quiet. You start to doubt again, because doubt is the only thing that never sleeps. Then, 48 hours later, it rings. It is not 911. It is the decoy line. And the call display is blank or meaningless, the way bad intentions often are. The detective is in the room within minutes, like he teleported. The telecom analyst patches in. You are not the one answering because this is controlled, but you are listening because you built the obsession, and now you get to hear it breathe. The undercover voice on the line is calm, friendly, bored, like a person who sells insurance. Hello. Then the caller. Sorry, wrong number. A beat. The undercover says, no problem. The caller could hang up now if this was real. But he does not. He laughs softly, like he is embarrassed. He says, you sound nice. He says, I am in a bind, and I hate to ask. He says, my cell is dying, and I am stranded. He says, can you do me a favor? It is so smooth it makes your skin crawl. Not because it is brilliant, because it is practiced. like a bartender pouring the same drink every night. The undercover plays along because that is the job. What kind of favor? The caller sighs like relief. He says, "I just need a ride." He says, "I can pay you cash." He says, "I am near the mall." By the payphone. He says, "I do not want to call a cab. It will take forever." He says, "Could you meet me just for a second?" You glance at the detective, and his face is hard because it is not a ROM number. It is an audition. He is listening to tone, to politeness, to loneliness. He is selecting for people who say yes. The undercover hesitates on purpose. The caller fills the silence with more hooks. He says a name, a first name that was on the decoy posting. He says it like he knows it belongs to the person on the line. Then he adds something worse. He references a local landmark near the decoy address, a little detail that was never in the ad, a coffee stand, a park, something you would only know if you drove that street, or if you watched it. Congratulations, your suspect is not just dialing, he is verifying. He is matching numbers to bodies in the world. The undercover agrees to meet because that is how you pull the thread. The caller gives a specific payphone kiosk, not any corner, one of your pinned fixed points. And he gives a time, 2:35 a.m., right in the shift change window, like he cannot help himself. They end the call and the room moves. Surveillance units get assigned, unmarked cars, plain clothes, a marked unit nearby as a safety net. Everyone hates the plan, which is how you know it is real. Plans that feel safe are usually fantasies. You go back to your console because your job is still to answer 911, but your mind is at that kiosk already, hearing the rain, seeing the neon buzz. 2:35 comes. You cannot be there, but you can imagine it too well. The undercover arrives in a normal-looking car, nothing that screams police. He parks where he can see the payphone without sitting directly under the light. Surveillance is spread out like pigeons pretending to be statues. The payphone stands there, bolted and stupid, a relic waiting to be used. And then it rings. Not the undercover's phone, the payphone itself. Once. Just once. A sharp ring in the cold, like a bell in an empty church. The undercover walks to it, because that is the script now. He picks up, and the voice on the other end is calm. The same voice you have heard in voicemail, even when it is pretending not to be. Wrong number? Click. The line goes dead. The undercover stands there with the receiver in his hand, looking at nothing. Surveillance watches the parking lot, and that is when someone spots it. A sedan, parked across the lot, engine idling, lights off. The same behavior the rookie described weeks ago. It is not proof. It is not even a crime, but it is the posture of someone waiting to see who shows. The undercover puts the handset back, slow. He walks away, like a disappointed Good Samaritan. The sedan does not move at first. Then it rolls forward, just a few feet, like a predator adjusting for wind, and someone on surveillance whispers into their mic. Vehicle is repositioning. The detective has a decision: wait and risk losing it, or move early and risk spooking the driver into a chase. He chooses early because nobody wants another body. Units converge, slow at first, then faster. The sedan's brake lights flash once, then go dark again. Then the engine revs, and the car bolts. It cuts across the lot, tires spitting water. It heads for the exit. A marked unit tries to block, and the sedan clips the front corner, metal screaming. Not a Hollywood crash, a real one. Ugly, grinding, short. Airbags pop like gunshots. The sedan spins and hits a curb. Hard. For a second, everything freezes. Then doors open. The driver crawls out, not injured enough to stop. Adrenaline doing what adrenaline does. He runs. He runs toward the back alley, toward the dark spaces between businesses. Officers chase, because now it is not just a weird call. Now it is fleeing. Now it is a crime you can write on a form. And in the chaos of the crash, a bag spills from the sedan, a cheap duffel zipper busted, and the contents scatter across wet pavement like someone dumped a desk drawer. Burner phones, little plastic slabs, too many of them. SIM cards in small baggies, like teeth. A notebook, soaked at the edges, pages curling. And a sheet of paper with a grid drawn in pen. Numbers. Your stomach drops, because a grid means planning, and planning means repetition. You are staring at a method, not a mood. You can almost hear the detective's teeth grind, because now it is evidence you can count. And countable things create obligations. A patrol unit calls in foot pursuit updates, fragmented, breathy, boots slapping wet asphalt. But your eyes keep falling back to the spill on the pavement. Phones and paper glowing under red and blue lights like the world's ugliest Christmas. A crime scene tech arrives fast because somebody finally said the magic words: pattern, lure. And now, attempted abduction is hanging in the air, even if no one says it yet. You watch from the dispatch center through radio traffic and status changes, because you are not there, but the system makes you there. Units stack up, tow truck en route, supervisor on scene, evidence requested. And somewhere in the middle of all that bureaucratic choreography, you hear a new call pop up. 911. Open line. No voice, just the soft hiss of a connection and nothing else. It lands on your console like a cigarette burn. You check the timestamp. It is within minutes of the crash. Congratulations, he is doing it again. Or one of those phones is. You feel your hands move before your brain finishes the thought. You route the open line for a trace. The best your aging system can do. You request a callback, and you already know what you will get. A ring that goes nowhere. A voicemail box that laughs at your effort. The callback comes back to one of the recovered prepaid numbers, which makes your throat go tight, because that means the phone is still powered, still alive, still part of the fight. It rings once, then drops into voicemail, and the greeting is nothing, man. It is nothing. Just a clipped tone like the box was never set up, never meant to be human. You hang up, and you mark it, and you realize what he just tried to do. He is flooding you. He is turning your own emergency line into a smoke screen. It is the oldest trick in a modern suit. Create noise so the signal disappears. The next call hits before you can exhale. 911. Open line. Hang up. Then another. Then another. The center's call board starts stacking. Little red flags blooming across your screen. Your coworkers glance over, irritation already forming, because open lines are usually drunks and pocket dials. But you know, You know this is a lever being pulled on purpose. The supervisor on duty barks for additional call takers because now the whole room is getting dragged into your private constellation. You hear a call taker 2 seats down mutter, "What is this? Some kind of prank storm." You keep your voice flat because panic spreads faster than any contagion. You say, "Treat every open line like it could be real." You say, "Clear fast, document everything, tag related," and inside your chest, a colder voice finishes the sentence. Because if you miss one real call in this flood, he wins twice. 7 minutes is not a long time in the daylight. At 2:30 something in the morning, 7 minutes is a small lifetime. It is a woman alone on a sidewalk, deciding whether to trust a stranger. It is a man bleeding in a parking lot, waiting for a siren that is busy. It is an officer in a foot chase, running blind because you cannot hear them over your own ringing phones. The flood stops as abruptly as it started, like someone turned a faucet off. The silence afterward feels like pressure in your ears. You sit there staring at the cleared calls, the notes, the times, and you realize he bought himself exactly what he wanted. Time. Not much. Just enough. A detective calls into the center from the crash scene, voice tight with adrenaline and anger. He asks if you saw the 911 flood. You say yes. He says that was him. He says one of the phones in the bag was set to auto dial. He says it is like setting off a car alarm so everyone looks the wrong way. You picture it, a cheap handset with a taped down button, dutifully calling for help so no one else can get it. He tells you they lost the driver. He says the guy ran into the alley and vanished between buildings. He says K9 tracked for a bit, then lost scent near a drainage ditch by the service road. He says, but we have the bag. He says it like a consolation prize, but it is a big one. It is the first time you have had anything solid to hold. Phones are solid. Paper is solid. Digits on a grid are solid. You tell him to preserve everything, every device, every scrap. You remind him, like he needs it, that defense attorneys love nothing more than sloppy hands. He sighs and says, we already have the techs photographing it in place. Then he adds, and this part lands heavy. One of the phones is still warm. Warm again. You hate that word now. Warm means he was touching it minutes ago. Warm means you were chasing the heat of him and he slipped out anyway. By dawn, the phones are in evidence lockers, humming quietly in their sealed plastic like trapped insects. The paper grid is laid out on a table under bright lights because the truth always looks uglier and fluorescent. You get pulled into another meeting because now you are part of this. Whether anyone admits it or not, they do not call it a task force yet because task force sounds expensive. They call it coordination. Coordination sounds like free. A telecom analyst sets the devices on the table and starts cataloging them like a sad collector. Each one gets a number, a photo, a bag, a chain of custody form. The detective leans over the grid paper, finger hovering without touching. He asks you what you think it is. You tell him what it looks like. A schedule, a fishing map, a route, blocks of numbers grouped together, some circled, some crossed out. You can see area codes, exchanges, little clusters that match neighborhoods. A few notes in the margins: 2:30, 2:45, mall kiosk, print place, Pacific. Some of the handwriting is neat. Some of it turns sharp and angry, like the pen was stabbed into the page. And then you see something that makes you swallow. Next to one cluster, someone wrote a single word: polite. Next to another, a different word: rude. And next to a third, the word that makes your skin tighten: alone. Congratulations. He was taking notes on voices the way you take notes on weather. A detective asks the telecom analyst what can be pulled from the phones. The analyst gives the answer that always sounds like an apology. Depends. If they are powered, you can sometimes extract call logs and saved drafts. If they are cheap and old, you might get texts stored on the device. If they are newer, everything is in the network and the device is just a door. But they do have the SIM cards. And SIMs tell stories, activation dates, carrier, sometimes a location where the card first woke up, sometimes a store where it was purchased, if the store did anything right. And stores rarely do anything right at 2 in the morning. You listen, and you realize how much this hinges on paperwork from people who sell chargers. The analyst mentions something called call detail records, which sounds fancy, but is basically a receipt for your conversation. What number called what number, at what time, through what tower. Not what was said, just the skeleton. You are living in the skeleton phase now. They assign you to help reconstruct the call paths because you are the one who noticed the rhythm first. You sit with the analyst and start building a timeline that looks like a train schedule from hell. Wrong number calls to 911, callbacks to payphones, decoy line contact, Sting meet time, crash, auto dial flood. Every event tied to a timestamp, because time is the only thing that does not lie. People lie, devices lie, memory lies with confidence. But time sits there, indifferent, waiting for you to do math. When the analyst finally pulls audio from one of the recovered phones, you hear something that makes the room go quiet. Voice drafts. Not sent. Recorded snippets, like a man rehearsing in a mirror. Sorry, wrong number. The line is delivered 3 different ways, like he is testing flavors. Embarrassed, playful, wounded. Then a pivot. Always the pivot. I hate to ask you. I am stranded. My cell is dying. Can you help me? And then another version. Colder, more direct. I can pay. Cash. Just a quick meet. The detective exhales through his nose like he is trying not to swear, because it is not random dialing anymore. It is scripted predation. A con with a destination. You sit there listening to the same sentence over and over, and you realize why it works. It sounds like a mistake, and people forgive mistakes. That is the hook. The analyst pauses the audio and points at the grid again. He says, "Look at the numbers. Some are off by 1 digit from others, some are off by 2. Near right," he says, like someone wants to reach a neighborhood, not a person. He explains it in plain language because he is used to cops. If you dial numbers that share the same exchange, you are fishing in a small pond. Same city, same general area. And if you do near misses, you hit people who are close to a target or who resemble the kind of person you want. Same age group, same economic slice, same late-night habits. You think of it like junk mail, but worse. A mailer that asks you to come outside at 2:30 in the morning. The detective asks the obvious question. Why call 911 at all? Why not just use the burners and avoid emergency systems? And you answer, because you have been living inside this question for weeks. Because 911 forces a reaction. 911 creates a record automatically. 911 creates a callback. If you want to confirm a payphone works, you can make the system call it back. If you want to see if patrol is near, you can listen for response. If you want to create noise, you can flood the center. 911 is not just a number. It is a lever you can pull, and it moves people. And now, you have proof he pulled it on purpose. The analyst starts going through the devices one by one, and you see arrogance hiding in plain sight. Some of the phones have the same contacts saved. A few have the same voicemail access number, and a couple share the same cheap wallpaper, like the buyer never bothered to change it. Criminals love comfort. Comfort makes them sloppy. Then the analyst finds something that makes everyone lean in. A text draft, unsent, sitting in the outbox like it got stuck. Meet at the kiosk, 2:35. Bring cash. Do not tell anyone. It is written like a command, not a request, and it is addressed to a number that is not in your decoys, not in your logs. A real person, a living unknown. The detective says, "Can we identify that number?" The analyst says yes, maybe, depending on carrier cooperation and how fast subpoenas move. Depending. Again, depending is the sound of justice taking a lunch break. They push warrants for the call detail records connected to every SIM card in the bag. It becomes a blizzard of paperwork. Carrier names, activation dates, tower IDs, forms signed, faxed, resent because someone put the wrong middle initial. You watch the machine grind forward, and you remember the simple truth nobody likes to say out loud. A man can make 10 calls in 10 minutes. It can take you 10 days to get the paper that explains them. While they wait on records, detectives work the physical side. The sedan is impounded, dented, and angry. Airbags hanging like deflated ghosts. They pull prints where they can, but the interior is wiped down enough to make it obvious. Not clean, just smudged, like someone used a shirt and panic. A tech finds fibers on the steering wheel, but fibers are everywhere. You could convict half the city with fibers. They find a fast food bag in the back seat, and even that gets photographed and logged. Because sometimes a receipt is the only honest witness. Meanwhile, patrol is asked to do what patrol always does in these moments. Drive the corridor. Look for the kiosks. Look for anyone lingering. Look for any car with lights off and engine on. They are hunting behavior, which is like hunting smoke. The detective circles back to the grid paper and asks you to help decode the timing. So you sit with it, highlighter in hand, and you start matching clusters to your log. This exchange block lines up with the area near the check cashing store. This one lines up with the strip mall kiosks. This one lines up with the print place. The times scribbled in the margins line up with shift change windows. 2:05, 2:17, 2:41. He had a schedule the way you have a work calendar. And the most chilling part is how normal that looks on paper. Just a man planning his week. The difference is, The week is made of strangers he wants to pull into the dark. Later that day, a carrier record finally comes back on one of the SIMs. Not the whole story, but a thread. The SIM was activated at a discount electronics kiosk, the kind inside a big box store where everything is behind glass. It is not a name yet, but it is a place, and places have cameras sometimes. Detectives pull footage from the store, and you watch it on a grainy screen in a back office. A man at the counter, baseball cap low, posture casual, buying prepaid phones like he is buying batteries. He pays with a card, not cash, which makes the detective's eyebrows rise, because that is the comfort again, the belief that no one will notice, or the belief that even if they do, he can explain it. The clerk hands over a little bag, the man tucks it into a jacket and walks out. His face is not clear enough to frame on a wall, but the card swipe is a gift. The store has a loyalty system, and loyalty systems love to remember you. The detective requests the purchase history tied to that loyalty number. More paperwork, more waiting. But the store manager is more cooperative than the phone companies because store managers fear corporate. Corporate is faster than the law when it wants to be. The manager prints out receipts. Same loyalty number used across multiple purchases, multiple days, multiple prepaid phone buys. Same pattern, like he could not resist collecting his points. Congratulations. Your suspect is earning rewards for being a predator. Now you have a name on paper attached to a loyalty account. Not proof of violence, but proof of procurement. A man buying tools. A man buying anonymity in bulk. Detectives run the name through databases, and the results come back disappointingly normal. No violent felonies. A couple minor charges. Traffic stuff. A life that looks like it could be anyone's, which is always the worst kind of result. Because monsters with obvious records are convenient. Monsters with normal paperwork can live next door. They start building the warrant packet because now they want his house, his computers, his notebooks. They want the place where the scripts were written and practiced. And while they are drafting, the case does what cases do. It moves faster than the paperwork. It moves on its own. Because one evening, before the warrants are signed, a call comes in from a neighboring jurisdiction. Not to you, but it lands on your desk through the back channels because people are finally taking this seriously. A woman reported an assault attempt. She survived. That word feels bright and strange in your mouth. Survived. She says she got a call late at night from someone who opened with, "Sorry, wrong number." She says she laughed it off, tried to hang up. He kept talking. He sounded embarrassed, friendly. He said he was stranded. He said his phone was dying. He asked for a favor, and she said no at first, and he pivoted to money, cash, he said. Just a quick meet. She tells officers she should have hung up, but he knew how to keep her on the line. He made it feel rude to end it. He made it feel like she was leaving someone helpless. That is the trick, you realize. He weaponizes politeness. She says she agreed to walk to a payphone near a small strip of businesses because he insisted his cell was dead. He wanted her at a fixed point. When she got there, the payphone was already off the hook. It was dangling on its cord like a dead fish, and that is how you know he was close enough to touch the scene first. She tells the responding officer the air smelled like cheap cologne and wet asphalt. She tells them she heard a little metal jingle, like keys or a keychain. Then a man stepped out from behind the vending machines, not rushing. He did not look like a movie monster. He looked like a person who knows you will hesitate before you run. He said her first name, not loud, not threatening, like he was checking a label. She froze because politeness has an off switch, and she had not found it yet. He moved in fast at the last second and grabbed her wrist. She fought, and she surprised him because he was buying compliance, not resistance. She screamed, and the scream changed everything. Real sound brings real witnesses. A door opened across the lot. A light snapped on. The man released her and slid away into the dark gap between buildings. She ran, and she lived, and now she is sitting under fluorescent lights telling you what he smelled like. That is the part that never makes it into headlines. Survival is paperwork and trembling hands and trying to remember a stranger's scent. The detective listening to her does not smile when she says she lived. He just nods because he has learned the math. One survivor means there were attempts that did not get reported. One survivor means the method is already seasoned. You get her statement secondhand because you are still on nights, still chained to the console. But the details land on you like damp clothes. Cologne, keychain, first name, fixed point, the same bones as your case, just wearing a different skin. The detective calls you after the interview, voice rough. He asks if any of your calls had background noise like jingling keys. You pull your private log and you scroll slow because you do not want to lie. You find 1-2 weeks back a faint metallic tick under the whisper. At the time you wrote it off as payphone hardware. Now you write it again in ink in your head. You tell him, "Yes, I heard something like that once." He exhales and says, "Good." Good meaning useful, not meaning happy. The survivor gives them something else too. She says he insisted on the payphone because he wanted to see her walk up. Not just meet, approach. He wanted to watch the last few steps. You picture it, and you hate how ordinary it is. A man standing where shadows are thick, counting your footfalls. You ask yourself why the payphones matter so much when he clearly has burners. Then you remember the sting. The payphone rang once, like a bell. He can make the phone itself perform. He can call the kiosk and watch who answers. He can use the ring as a remote-controlled leash. And you, sitting miles away, will dutifully document the ring. That is the insult baked into the method. He is using the system's reflexes. The warrants finally get signed because now there is a living victim with a story. And living victims move paper faster than dead ones, even when nobody admits it. You hear about the entry plan in pieces because you are not tactical, you are infrastructure. But they want you present for the interview phase later because you are the one who can recognize cadence, because your ear has been marinated in his rhythm. May comes with that gray Washington light that never feels like morning. They pick a day when he is likely home, based on his work schedule and the purchases tied to that loyalty account. They line up at a small rental house near Lakewood, a place that looks like 1,000 other places. When you arrive, you stay behind the stack because nobody wants the dispatcher catching a stray bullet. You stand on wet grass and listen to boots move over concrete. Someone taps the door, hard. Police? Search warrant. No response. They hit it again. Then the ram comes, and the door gives up with a crack like old wood snapping. They flow in, fast, trained, quiet, in that way people get when fear is doing the driving. You wait outside, hands in your jacket pockets, pretending you are not shivering, not from cold, from anticipation. A neighbor's dog barks and will not stop because animals do not respect warrants. Then a voice calls out from inside, "One in custody," and you feel your shoulders drop a fraction, like you are holding a weight you did not know you picked up. They walk him out in cuffs. Average height, baseball cap, of course, a jacket that looks like it came from a discount rack. He is not smiling. He is not raging. He is watching faces like he is reading a menu. When his eyes pass over you, they pause a beat too long, and you feel stupidly like you have been seen through glass. Inside the house, the smell is stale laundry and old fast food. Not a lair, just a life with bad habits. They start photographing everything before they touch it, because now everyone is thinking about court. They find the obvious stuff in the first hour: prepaid phone packaging in the trash, receipts folded into a drawer like someone could hide paper from time, a cheap notebook on the kitchen table with numbers written in blocks. But the real find is in a back bedroom, a wall calendar, the kind with scenic mountains hanging crooked. On it, someone has written exchanges and time windows in pen. Not appointments, targets. 2:05 to 2:20, 2:30 to 2:45, mall kiosk, Pacific, print place. It looks like your log, if your log had teeth. They find a shoebox in the closet. Inside are SIM cards in little sleeves, labeled with marker like spices, in a pantry. North, south, mall, week 1, week 2. They find a small bottle of cologne on the dresser. Generic brand, drugstore cheap. And beside it, a keychain with a little metal charm that jingles when a tech lifts it. The survivor's detail made solid. Congratulations, memory just became evidence. They sit him down in the living room while the search continues. He asks if he can smoke. They tell him no. He asks if he is under arrest or just detained. The detective tells him he is under arrest, and he reads the rights like a bedtime poem. The man nods along like he has heard it before, which means he probably has. They transport him to the station, and later you are brought into an interview room to listen, not to interrogate, to be the ear that recognizes the script. The room is too bright and too cold. A metal table bolted to the floor. 2 chairs that squeak when you shift, so the room can always hear your discomfort. The suspect sits with his hands cuffed to a ring. He looks tired, but not broken. He looks like a man who still believes he can talk his way into a smaller box. The detective starts with soft questions. Where do you work? Where were you on the night of the crash? Do you own any prepaid phones? The suspect smiles a little. He says everyone owns prepaid phones. He says he likes to tinker. He says he does social experiments. He says he is lonely. Lonely is his favorite costume. Then the detective lays out the grid paper in front of him, inside a plastic sleeve. The suspect's eyes flick down and back up. Just a flick, but it is the first real reaction. The detective asks him why the grid has notes like polite and alone. The suspect shrugs with his shoulders because his hands cannot shrug. He says it is just notes. He says he calls wrong numbers sometimes and writes down who is nice. He says it is not a crime to talk to people. He says he never hurt anyone. He says prank calls, nothing more. You sit behind the glass and you feel your jaw tighten, because this is the part that always happens. The criminal tries to make the act sound like weather, just something that happened. No intention, no plan, no harm. The detective slides a transcript across the table. The decoy call. Sorry, wrong number. You sound nice. Can you do me a favor? Meet me at the kiosk. The suspect reads it and gives a small laugh. He says, that could be anybody. He says, you people set me up. The detective does not argue about morality. He argues about mechanics. He asks why the call came from a device tied to his purchase history. He asks why the same loyalty account bought dozens of phones. He asks why the sedan that fled was registered to someone connected to him. The suspect blinks, slow. He says he borrowed the car. He says the phones were gifts. He says he buys them for friends. Friends, another costume. The detective shifts to the survivor. He asks if he has ever met a woman in a parking lot by a payphone. He asks if he wears cologne. The suspect says lots of people wear cologne. He says he has never touched anyone. He says people lie when they are embarrassed. That one lands like a slap because he is trying to turn shame into a weapon. The detective keeps his voice flat. He asks about the first victim, the one behind the check cashing place. He does not say her name out loud in the room because he does not want the suspect to own it. He says, a person was killed. He says, their last outgoing call went to a number tied to one of these SIM cards. The suspect leans back as far as the cuffs allow. He says he cannot control who calls him. He says people dial wrong numbers all the time. He says it is a coincidence. Coincidence is his third favorite costume. Now it becomes a slog of tying skeleton to flesh. Because you cannot just tell a jury he is creepy. You have to show intent like a photograph. Digital forensics starts extracting the phones found in the crash bag and the phones taken from the house. Some are wiped, some are broken. But wiping is also a story. Wiping is a hand motion that says, I knew this mattered. They pull call logs where they can. They pull text drafts. They pull the recorded voice snippets that make your skin crawl every time you hear them. Sorry, wrong number. The same line, delivered like a man practicing a smile in a mirror. Then, the pivot. I just need a favor. I can pay. Meet me by the phone. And the most damning part is the consistency. Not one impulsive message. Not one drunk mistake. A library of approaches. That is not loneliness. That is marketing. While the lab work grinds, detectives start building the narrative around the first homicide. They go back to the check-cashing storefront. They canvass again for cameras, and they find what they always find. Cameras pointed at cash registers, not alleys. Systems that overwrite in days. Owners who shrug and say, we did not keep it. Because why would they? The dead do not pay rent. They talk to employees who remember a person lingering by the payphone weeks earlier. A man in a cap. A man who looked like he was waiting for a ride. A man who kept glancing toward the highway like he was checking timing. Not enough for a lineup. Enough to make you hate how normal he looked. They pull the victim's phone records from before it went missing. It shows a new prepaid number activated recently, a deliberate change, a step off the grid. They learn the victim had been trying to avoid someone in their personal life, or trying to start over, or trying to be unfindable, like people do when the world has been too loud. And someone used that new number against them. Because new numbers do not live in many places. They are shared only with people you trust, or posted somewhere you forgot you posted, or handed to someone who sounded harmless. This is where your case gets ugly in a quiet way, because the method is built to exploit the human reflex to be decent, to answer, to forgive, to help. The detectives try to prove how he got victims to a specific location. They look for patterns in his grid notes. They compare to the survivor's timeline. He kept insisting on payphones, not because he needed them, because they are stages. A payphone kiosk is a small lit circle in a dark lot. It is a place where you stand still, a place where you are visible. A place where you can be approached without it looking like an ambush. I am just here to use the phone, he can say. I am just waiting. And if you show up alone, you just did the hard part for him. Congratulations, you walked yourself into his frame. Then there is the bureaucratic nightmare. Proving that the wrong number calls to 911 were part of the lure, not just noise. The defense will say, he was curious. He was bored. He was doing a prank. He never meant harm. So detectives build a timeline that shows the calls were not random. They show the clustering at shift change. They show the corridor. They show the fixed points. They show the flood during the getaway. And you sit in meetings where grown adults argue over whether a pattern is admissible. Because law is not built to prosecute vibes. It is built to prosecute acts. And this man lived in the space just before the act, the planning space, the space where everyone wishes they could arrest someone, but usually cannot. They bring in an expert on telecommunications to explain near-right dialing. He talks about exchanges and number blocks and how you can fish within a neighborhood without knowing a name. He uses careful language because experts know juries can smell arrogance. He translates it into human. He says, it is like knocking on doors in one apartment building until someone answers. Only the doors are phones, and the hallway is the night. You keep thinking about the wrong number calls to 911 because that part is personal now. Not just because your name was used, but because he used your workplace like a tool. He turned your reflex to help into a lever for his own schedule. The prosecutor asks you to prepare to testify about the pattern. You laugh once, quietly, when you are alone, because testify sounds clean. In reality, it means sitting in a suit that does not fit under courtroom lights while someone paid to doubt you makes you sound paranoid. And you already know the defense angle. Dispatchers hear weird things. Dispatchers get stressed. Dispatchers imagine patterns. Because they sit in the dark too long, they will try to make you the unreliable narrator of your own job. So you go back through every call. You pull recordings. You document timestamps. You create a binder, because binders are how the system pretends to be in control. Every wrong number call, every callback result, every officer check, every note about warm handset, wiped receiver, scuff marks, a smear on a coin return, which felt like nothing at the time. Now it sits in your binder like a small, dirty prophecy. Then the digital unit gets the break everyone was waiting for. One burner phone is tied, through call detail records, to the homicide victim's last outgoing call. It is not a guess, it is a logged connection. The victim called. The burner answered, or at least rang. Then, later, there is a call from that burner to a payphone near the check cashing storefront. Then, 8 minutes later, your 911 line gets the wrong number call in that same corridor. Time does its indifferent math, and the math says this is not coincidence. This is choreography. They confront the suspect with the sequence. He tries the same lines again. Coincidence. People call payphones. People get murdered for street reasons. He is just a guy with too many phones. The detective finally leans in and asks in a question that is not for information. It is for pressure. Why did you write alone on the grid? The suspect's eyes narrow a fraction. He says, because some people sound alone. He says it like it is obvious, like it is harmless, like he is describing a weather report. The detective lets the silence sit there, heavy. Then he asks, how do you know what alone sounds like? And for the first time, the suspect looks irritated. He says, I am done talking. He asks for a lawyer, and that is it. That is the moment the interview ends, not with a confession, but with a wall. Because people like him do not confess when they still believe the system has gaps. And the system always has gaps. So you do what you always do when a man hides behind his rights, and your case hides behind its paperwork. You go hunting for the parts of him that do not know how to shut up. You stop expecting a confession, and you start expecting routines. Because routines leak. Routines leave crumbs in calendars, receipts, and habits. And you already saw his habits pinned to a wall like a shrine to timing. The detective steps out of the interview room first. You follow a beat later, because you are not supposed to be there emotionally. You are supposed to be there technically. Your job is to recognize cadence, identify a voice, and keep your face neutral. But your face is not neutral when you have heard your own name used as a tool. Out in the hallway, the detective rolls his shoulders like the building is too small. He says, we do not need him to talk. He says it like he is reassuring you. He is also reassuring himself, because the uncomfortable truth is that court loves words. Jurors love a quote they can hang their whole judgment on. Without that, you have to build intent out of artifacts, which is harder. Harder, but not impossible. You go back to the evidence that does not get a lawyer. The phones, the grid, the drafts, the little humiliating loyalty account that tracked him buying anonymity like bulk cereal. Digital forensics starts doing what digital forensics always does. They sit in a windowless room and ask a computer to remember what a human tried to erase. Some of the burners are useless. No saved contacts, no drafts, nothing but the most recent calls. A couple are smashed, screen spiderwebbed, battery missing, which is not a loss, not really, because smashed phones tell you a story too. Smashed phones say, I panicked. Panic says, I knew what this was, and knowing is another way to spell intent. One tech finds the same voicemail access number programmed into multiple devices. That seems minor until you remember what voicemail is. Voicemail is a mailbox, a fixed point. a place a person returns to again and again. If you can find that mailbox, you can learn who else visits it. The text submits a request to the carrier for the voicemail account metadata. More forms, more waiting, more fax machines performing their sad little ballet. Meanwhile, the homicide detectives lean into the physical calendar and notebook. They photograph every page, every corner, curl, every pen stroke. They treat it like scripture because, in a way, it is. It is his doctrine. You sit with them and read the notebook entries out loud because reading makes patterns audible. Wrong number? Hung up. Wrong number. Talked 2 minutes. Polite, female, alone. Wrong number. Male, rude. Hung up. Wrong number. Kept talking. Agreed to meet. Payphone. There are check marks next to some. There are angry slashes through others. There is an entry that simply says, wasted. And you hate how the word sits there. Not wasted like drunk, wasted like time, wasted like a person who did not cooperate. That is when you understand something you did not want to understand. He was not improvising victims. He was sorting them. He was building a personal little customer list of who would come when called. The detective makes a decision you can feel in the room. He says, they are going to widen the net. Not just Tacoma calls, not just your corridor. They are going to subpoena every number on that grid and notify potential victims. It is the kind of decision that sounds noble until you picture the workload. Dozens, maybe hundreds of numbers. People who will be woken up by a detective saying, your phone number is in a predator's notebook. Some will be grateful. Some will be furious. Some will lie because people hate admitting they almost did something risky. Some will not remember because the brain loves to delete frightening near misses. And some will remember too well and break in the middle of a sentence. Congratulations, you have just created a whole new kind of trauma notification. You are looped in because many of those calls started with 911 noise. The department needs dispatch audio, timestamps, and anything that shows the wrong number method was not accidental. So you go back to your console and you pull recordings from the archive. Each one is a tiny piece of bad theater. A breath, a click, a whisper that stops itself. And sometimes, if you listen with headphones and the lights low, the background is not empty. A car door, a distant radio, not police, just talk radio. The kind people use to keep themselves awake. A passing semi on the highway. The soft metal jingle, faint but there, like a signature you are trained to ignore. You mark each clip with notes for the detectives. Possible keychain sound at 2:12 a.m. Possible keypad beeps at 2:08 a.m. Possible payphone door slap at 2:17. You feel like you are translating a ghost language into a report. This is the part of policing no one dramatizes. Listening to the same 3 seconds of audio 40 times, hoping for one new syllable. And the more you listen, the more you realize how he used the system's expectations. Dispatchers are trained to treat open lines as accidents until proven otherwise. Officers are trained to clear payphone checks quickly when nothing obvious is happening. Everyone is trained to prioritize the screaming, not the whispering. He lived in the whisper space. He counted on you rolling your eyes. He counted on the word unfounded. The prosecutor begins shaping the case in a way you can feel through meetings. They want to present him as a planner who used telephony as a lure. They also want to avoid making it sound like a movie because juries hate stories that feel too clever, so they keep it simple. He called. He apologized. He prolonged contact. He pressured. He insisted on a fixed meet point. He watched. He moved in. One person died, one survived, and the rest are unknown. That is the spine. Your wrong number calls to 911 becomes supporting evidence, a demonstration of method and timing. But there is a problem, and it shows up like a stain you cannot scrub. The homicide scene has no direct eyewitness, no camera, no clean DNA, no weapon recovered, and the victim's phone is missing, which means you do not have the device that contains the final conversation. You have only the network skeleton, call detail, records that show 2 numbers touched. The defense is going to say, touching numbers is not touching people. The defense is going to say, someone else could have had that burner. Someone else could have used those payphones. Someone else could have killed the victim after a harmless call. It is nauseating the way doubt can be manufactured, but doubt is what attorneys sell. So, detectives go back and look for something the defense cannot wiggle away from. Something physical, something unique. They examine the smear on the coin return from your first patrol check, not because it is glamorous, because it is there. The evidence tech took swabs back then, almost as a courtesy. They were logged, filed, and forgotten because the report got downgraded. Now, those swabs get pulled from storage like old bones. They run them for DNA, knowing it is a long shot. Payphones are public. Public means contaminated, but contamination is not always total. Sometimes a fresh touch sits on top of older grime like a new fingerprint in wet cement. The lab comes back with what they call a partial profile. Partial means frustrating. Partial means it might match, it might not, it might never be enough for court. But partial also means something was there, something biological, something human. They compare it to the suspect's sample taken after arrest. It is not a clean hit, not an exclusion either, just the ugly middle ground where science shrugs. Congratulations, the lab just gave you a maybe. So the detectives pivot again. They go for behavioral linkage. They want to show that this man's method is so specific that it is unlikely anyone else did the exact same dance. They focus on the survivor's details, the cologne, the keychain, the insistence on payphones. They search the house harder, not for weapons, but for trophies, for souvenirs, because people like this sometimes cannot help themselves. They dig through drawers, under beds, inside shoeboxes that smell like old socks. They find more SIM sleeves. They find handwritten scripts. They find a small stack of printed maps, highlighted routes through the corridor, back alley exits marked in pen, parking lots circled, places where cameras do not point, and in a kitchen junk drawer, buried under rubber bands and dead batteries, they find a torn receipt. Check caching place. Same chain as the homicide location. Not dated the night of the murder, but close enough to make the detective's eyes narrow. On the back is a scribble, half written like someone started a joke and abandoned it. Sorry. Then a line through it. Angry. That small thing matters because it shows he carried the phrase into the physical world. He did not just say it into phones. He wrote it. He rehearsed it on paper like an actor. The prosecutor likes that. Jurors understand writing. Writing feels deliberate in a way audio can be explained away. While all of that churns, the telecom analyst finally gets the loyalty account purchase history expanded. Not just the big box store in Tacoma, other stores, other dates. And the dates reach back further than your first call log, not by weeks, by months. Different city, different county, same pattern of prepaid phone purchases clustered near late night hours. That is when the detective calls you into yet another room with bad carpet. He lays out the timeline like he is dealing cards. Your first wrong number call was February 2006. Your corridor pins started then, but his purchases show he was building inventory as early as the previous fall. And not just in Tacoma, he was practicing somewhere else. The detective asks you if you remember the suspect mentioning a number you never logged. You do. In the interview, when he slipped and referenced a call that predated your attention, a number you did not recognize, a number that made your stomach drop because it meant this method had a prequel. Now they have a location for that prequel, a neighboring city where payphones still existed in little clusters outside old strip malls. The detective says they are going to coordinate with that jurisdiction. He says, "We need to know if there were similar calls, similar assaults, similar missing persons." He says it like he is asking the universe for permission. And you realize something else. You are not chasing one case anymore. You are chasing the spread of a method. Because methods travel. People learn them from each other, or reinvent them, or pick them up like germs from public services. This one is particularly nasty because it hides inside normal human behavior. Everyone has dialed wrong. Everyone has apologized. Everyone has stayed on the line a little too long because hanging up feels rude. He took that reflex and sharpened it. A week later, the survivor comes in for a follow-up, and you are asked to sit in behind the glass again. Not because she needs you, because the prosecutor wants to test her memory against the suspect's voice drafts. It is delicate, and it feels cruel. You watch her sit at a table with a victim advocate beside her. Her hands are folded tight, like she is holding herself together. They play a clip. Sorry, wrong number. Her eyes close for a second, and you can see her body try to leave the room without her. She says, "That is him." Not certain like a movie witness, certain like a person recognizing a smell from a fire. They play another version of the line, a different delivery. She flinches anyway. She says, "He practiced." She says it with disgust, because now she can hear what she almost became, a mark on his little schedule. Afterward, you stand in the hallway and listen to the prosecutor talk to detectives about charges: attempted kidnapping, attempted assault, telecommunications harassment, misuse of emergency services for the 911 flood, the homicide, and the hardest part, proving the homicide beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecutor says they can make the method clear. They can make the planning clear. But they need to place him with the first victim in a way that is not just phone records. So detectives go back into the victim's life, which is always the messiest part. They interview friends. They interview ex-partners. They interview coworkers who barely knew them. They look through the victim's recent changes, the new prepaid number, the attempt to be off-grid. They check local classifieds, forums, community boards, because that is where a new number gets shared innocently. Someone selling a couch, someone looking for a roommate, someone posting for rideshare. Long before rideshare had rules, they find a small ad the victim placed, offering to buy used electronics. Cash paid. Meet in public. A line that sounds safe until you remember public at 2:30 a.m. is just a word. The detectives compare that ad to the suspect's maps. The ad's suggested meet area overlaps the corridor. Not proof, but a proximity that feels like a hand hovering over a throat. Then, finally, another thread comes in from the carrier records. One of the suspect's burners was used to send a text to a number that belongs to the homicide victim, days before the night they died. The content is simple. "Hey, is this the guy from the ad?" The victim replies, "Yeah, who is this?" The burner replies, "Sorry, wrong number." Then, minutes later, another message. "Actually, can I ask you something?" The victim responds, "What?" Then the pivot. "I am stranded near the check cashing place. Can you help? Cash, just 5 minutes." The detective reads it out loud in the meeting room, and nobody speaks for a while, because this is not a vibe. This is a script touching a real person, a written lure. The defense can still argue. They can say, maybe the victim agreed and met someone else. But it gets harder to pretend this was harmless curiosity when the same line appears in the same cadence in multiple contexts. Now the case has something it did not have before: a direct bridge between the suspect's method and the victim's phone. Not the missing device, but the network memory of it. A receipt for manipulation. The detective looks at you during that meeting, and you can tell he is thinking the same thing you are. If you had pushed harder on the first call, would it have changed anything? If patrol had staked out the first kiosk, would there be one less grave? That is the kind of thought that keeps you up even when you are exhausted enough to sleep on concrete. But the truth is uglier and simpler. You cannot patrol every payphone. You cannot arrest a man for sounding wrong, and systems do not move until something breaks. In this case, something broke in the worst way. So the machine moves now, slow and grinding, toward court. And you get assigned what they call a witness prep session. It is not dramatic. It is sitting in a small room while an attorney tells you how not to sound like a person with feelings. They tell you to say, "I observed," not "I felt." They tell you to say, "The call occurred at 2:17 a.m., not "It felt like a signature." They tell you to speak like a clock because juries trust clocks. They do not always trust dispatchers who have been awake all night listening to strangers die. You practice. You practice describing the wrong number pattern without sounding like you are telling a campfire story. You practice saying the voicemail greeting contained "my first name." You practice saying the calls clustered during shift change windows. You practice explaining ANI and ALI, automatic number identification and automatic location information. In plain language, you say, "It is the system's best guess at a call source." You say, "It can be wrong by blocks." You say, "Payphones route differently." You say, "Prepaid phones are designed to be harder to trace." And you keep your voice steady, because steadiness reads as truth. Then the prosecutor asks you the question that matters. Why does 911 matter to this method? You give the answer you have been carrying for months. 911 creates a forced callback. 911 creates a record even when the caller says nothing. 911 ties up lines when flooded. 911 is a way to test response time without risking a direct call to patrol. And 911 carries authority, even when it is accidental. People treat emergency systems like gravity. They assume it cannot be used as a tool for harm. He proved it can.